I will call our organization meeting to order and would entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda for our organizational and annual meeting.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Cam, I'm voting in favor.
Thank you, Director Easom. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And I will turn over the meeting to Board Secretary Kim Coven.
Actually, we have to have a motion to appoint me as the,
Oh, what?
Motion to appoint Kim Colvin as board secretary,
temporary chair.
Temporary chair.
temporary chair.
She is
There we
board
go.
secretary.
Is there a second?
Second.
We're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor. As the board secretary and temporary chair, I will preside over the election of school board officers. Please remember there is no second required for a director to be nominated. If you are nominated to office, please verbally respond if you are willing to accept the nomination. Directors should not discuss or debate the merits of directors who have been placed in nomination. That is what the vote is for. The floor is now open to receive nominations for the office of school board president.
Cam, I would like to nominate Director Malone for president.
Thank you, Director Easom.
I accept.
Hearing no other nominations, the floor is closed to nominations for school board president. With only one nomination, we can take a verbal vote. Director Malone has been nominated as board president and has accepted the nomination. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Malone has been duly elected as the office of school board president. I will now administer the oath of office upon the board president.
Okay.
Oh, please stand. Thank you. President of the board, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the school board president in the Iowa City Community School District, Iowa City, Iowa, as now and hereafter required by law?
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we will use the same process for the school board vice president vote. If you are nominated to office, please verbally respond if you're willing to accept the nomination. The floor is now open to receive nominations for the office of school board vice president.
Cam, I would like to nominate Director Abram.
Thank you. Do you
I will.
accept? Okay.
I do.
Hearing no other nominations, the floor is closed to nominations for school board vice president. With only one nomination, we can take a verbal vote. Director Abraham has been nominated as board vice president and has accepted the nomination. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Director Abraham has been duly elected to the office of school board vice president, and I will now administer the oath of office upon the board vice president. Vice President of the board, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the school board vice president in the Iowa City Community School District, Iowa City, Iowa, as now and hereafter required by law?
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
The board president and the board vice president will now assume their elected duties, and I turn the chair over to President Malone.
Thank you, Board Secretary Coven. With that, our last item is the 2024 Board Committee assignments. Here you will see a description of the committees as well as board committees from last year. Several directors had asked for this to appear separately on the agenda just so we can walk through what those committees are and how they are currently made up of usually 3 board members. We will send out, or I should say, Board Secretary Coven will send out a sign-up sheet, most likely before our December meeting, for directors to sign up for various committees throughout this next year. So with that, and hopefully directors had an opportunity to review the committees and the commissions, were there any questions or comments?
I do have a question. So if either the operations committee is made up of 3 people, and so like we do with the policy and governance, we have a policy review section. Will we do the same with operations so that we can open it up to discussion and questions about what occurs at the operations meeting?
Yes.
We can,
I
yes.
think we should, yeah.
Or
Great.
go ahead.
Perfect.
Did you want to say something?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right, that's totally fine too.
I was gonna say, I was thinking before Director Finch finished the question, but yes, I think that's the appropriate way to do it for all the committees. And it's just kind of, we have those different items on ops that we normally bring back either as a discussion item later or as an action item, but it makes sense to just have it as a standing item every time we have a meeting as well.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I was just going to kind of talk about expectations, and if you look at the charter, right, it specifically talks about the 2 committees that aren't committees of the whole being a 3-person committee with an alternate that then reports back to the board. And my perspective, that's how committees work. That's how they work in my business. I mean, that's just how I've always seen it. And I think when you start to have everyone showing up at committee meetings, it no longer becomes a committee meeting. And I have concerns that as you start to have quorums there, you can start taking action at committee meetings, which is very bad form. And I think it's appropriate that the committee meets, does their thing, reports back to the board. If the board has direction to send to the committee, then they take it back to committee. That's how we did it for the first several years I was on the board. I don't see why we would change from that approach, particularly that's how our charters are set to be, and that's how I see an expectation for a committee.
So is it okay for me to say so? Okay. So I completely respect that opinion, and I agree with that. However, I just have to say, that's not how we've been using the operations committee. We've been kind of using the operations committee to discuss some really important matters, and all of us show up to that. So will we sort of kind of rethink what is appropriate to put on the operations committee, and maybe just title those as work sessions instead? Or since you're the chair of the operations committee, how do you view that moving forward?
I think that's a fair assessment. I didn't set any of the agenda items for the
Yeah.
2 operations committees that have been there, and I think there was a request from admin to have everybody show up at the last one specifically, and I would honor
Yeah.
that request. But I think that's a valid point as to what we put on it as agenda, and to your previous point of then reporting it back at the board table is totally appropriate as well. So I think there should be some intentionality of what ends up on there, which is probably why we don't have a topic as of yet for the next one.
I haven't chaired ops for a year, but when I did chair it and we did that, it was more of a recognition that P&G is on like a set cycle of policy review. And so taking time away from P&G is disruptive because it throws you off the policy review schedule. And so what we would do is with operations, it's less rigid and it's more flexible. If there was something that came up like cell phones or COVID or we used it for several of our financial budgetary meetings, then what we did is kind of canceled operations and instead had or said a committee of the whole, but it's never been a unadvanced, like we're doing something really important that everybody should be there. Everyone's had notice well in advance, because at least when I was the chair, we would do it from agenda setting at the board table. We would say, hey, let's not do an operations meeting. Let's flip that into financial oversight. And we can still, we can still do that. I just think operations is just more flexible by the nature of what work gets done there. It's easier to push some of that work and highlight more pressing needs, and it gives the board, I think, us flexibility and adaptability to be able to address important issues more nimbly.
And I think going forward, because that was a request from admin for the last operations committee, I think we reviewed, was it the 2030 emissions?
It's a climate action plan.
So, but maybe not using the title operations and saying it's canceled or we're going to do a work session instead would be appropriate in that manner to just ensure we're operating on the same standard for all of our committees where, except for education, it's not an expectation that all 7 of us attend. Is that a fair statement from what I'm hearing?
And just to be clear from this discussion, we don't have a problem with non-committee members who are board members attending this committee.
It is an open meeting. Board members can attend, non-committee members can attend committee meetings.
They may not take part in the decision to make a
I have a question
recommendation.
about that, and like, what's the expectation for non-committee members that are attending? Are they sitting at the table or sitting in the audience watching?
I can tell you-
And the follow-up question, this might be maybe a question for whoever's the policy people. When we, the one vote we do is approving of the minutes, and we ask for a motion and a second and approval of it. That should be limited to the committee members, correct?
Absolutely.
I would say
Yes,
so, yeah.
that is. To your first point, I can only share that when I first joined the board, it was practice that if you were not on the committee, you didn't sit at the table unless you were invited to sit at the table. It doesn't make it awkward sometimes, yes, but I personally, I mean, that's why I think sometimes when I've come in, I might be like, nope, I'm sitting in the back. I've done that a couple of times in recent years, but that has been the practice for several years before I got on the board and for the first 4 years of me being on the board. I don't know if there's a standard practice or if we have to set one, and I'm more than happy to hear from Board Secretary Coven or is there any type of Robert rule or Deputy Superintendent Ramey?
There is, I mean, typically, in a committee meeting, you take no action. Like you say, the minutes is probably just the exception.
I
the
think
way-
that Director Eystone pointed out the obvious earlier is that when they're, as a majority of the board together, it can send a different connotation. I apologize for cutting you
No,
off, Kim.
please do.
But the other protection is, right, as a public body, the agenda has to be posted 24 hours in advance. And so the committee would be limited to any official action that really was on the agenda or would be in violation of Iowa Public Meetings Law. President Malone, it's open to the board about how you want to structure your committees, you know, who wants to attend, the invitation or non-invitation to sit at the table. I think that's all discretion of the board.
And could we say it's also at the discretion of the committee, or should it be just uniform? I mean, that's just a
I
question
think it should
for
be
the
uniform.
board
I
to
don't have a
consider.
strong preference. I just want
Okay.
us to all have the same expectation. If you go to a committee meeting that's not your committee, where should you sit? Like I said, I don't have a strong preference there.
And also an understanding that if you're not on the committee, you can't make the motion to approve the minutes. You
And
don't
that was
get
the
to
part I was
vote.
more concerned about.
Yeah, which has been happening, but if you're not on the committee, you actually don't get a vote. And if the committee isn't necessarily formally voting on anything other than that, but still driving direction, there's 3 people on that committee or an alternate if somebody's absent, and it's those 3 people who are driving the direction of the committee. The rest of the board members are welcome to attend and observe, but you're not on the committee.
I mean, technically speaking, if we're gonna go down this route at that back table, nobody else should be speaking unless a board member should be deferring the speaking to them, right? Because this is Robert's
Correct.
Rules of Order. There's 3 people, but if we're gonna go down this route, we're gonna get highly nuanced at board member must sit in the back, and then that's when they can answer a question or ask a question, say, hey, Director Finch, you're up there, can I ask a question? And then she has to defer to me. That's kind of the same way with everybody else at the table. I kind of like the style that we have going, where other board members can show up just like, I'm sorry, Brady, I don't have your title off. President Shutt, sorry. President Shutt sits at the table and he voices his thoughts and his opinions even when he isn't asked a question, and I like that. But if we want to go down this highly nuanced route of board members need to sit in the back, then we need to go down that route too, that the only people that should be at that table are the 3 board members, and then we call on people. So I just, this approach right now is just getting in the weeds of what is going on that has been effective over the past year. And so that's my piece.
But I think what you're not hearing some of us say is some of us don't think it's effective.
Then if we want to go get to effective, then there should be 3 people at that table, and those 3 people and Superintendent Degner, and then other people can be deferred to if we want to go down this highly regimented Robert's Rules of Order.
Well,
And following the rules of order.
sorry, I don't mean
Yeah.
to interrupt. But oftentimes, the topic of conversation is when those additional people are invited to attend beforehand, because you can't have a conversation, I'm just throwing it out there, if operations was going to talk about cell phone policies and what the Teachers Association thought about it. You can't have that conversation realistically without that invitation going out. I mean, I'm just saying that's how we operated for a while.
I think to Director Finch's point, I think if we're intentional about the topics that we have at our committee meetings, it's not going to be a problem, right? And if people want to come sit at the table, they can come sit at the table, and it's appropriate who's making a motion to approve the minutes kind of thing, that's fine, right? I think if we're intentional about what the topics are, if they are going to be a heavy topic that people should all be weighing in on, it shouldn't be a committee meeting. So I think we can just handle that by our intentionality of our committee topics.
Can I just clarify? You said it shouldn't be a committee meeting, is that what?
If
Yeah,
we're
okay.
a heavy thing
I
that
just
we're
heard you
all
wrong, that's all.
should be weighing in on, it
Yeah.
should not be a committee
Okay,
meeting.
right.
We should
Great.
call it a work session.
Yes. All right. Any other questions or?
I
Deputy
just build off of
Superintendent?
what Director Finch said earlier about having a report out from the operations committee. As you standardize that, part of the point, I believe, from the board for those report outs is so the community hears what happened at the meetings too. And so that might be something you consider to add for all of the committees. So not just operations, but also for the ed committee. You all are there, but the community might not be there. And so just something you should think about standardizing that as the agenda.
Yeah.
I feel like
So
we
can
used
go-
to do that. I feel like I used to,
Yeah,
anyway.
we did.
We just, somehow that got dropped off.
I think it just fell
the
off.
agenda.
Yeah, I
Fell
think
off the
we can
agenda. We could
definitely
get back to
do an
those regular
agenda
report
setting. We
outs.
can look at the agenda setup and add those reports in there.
Love it.
All right? That takes us to our annual approvals for for the consent agenda. Are there items that directors would like to pull?
I would like to pull number 6, virtual learning days.
Okay, number 6, virtual learning days have been pulled. Are there any other items? Hearing none, is there a motion for approval of our annual approvals consent agenda?
I move that we approve the annual approvals consent agenda minus item 6, virtual learning days.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to the item that was removed, which is virtual learning days. Director Lingo?
I I pulled it to vote against it, like last year when we had this, or last spring when we had to come up. There has not been a policy. It's pretty well documented and studied that virtual learning at scale does not work. It does not increase academic outcomes. And after I voted last time, there were some other caveats that got added to it that some of the teachers reached out to me. Some of the early elementary teachers, they reached out to thank me because they had a hard time, especially during the pandemic, trying to reach those early elementary grades and working with those students. And I heard concerns from secondary teachers about students having Chromebooks at home and a reliable, stable internet connection that goes for all grade levels. And given, finally, the big issue is attendance and leaving points on the table. Again, if people don't have reliable Chromebooks, they don't have a reliable computer. If they don't have a reliable internet connection, they can't participate in virtual learning days. And right now, 14.2% of our elementary scores on these performance profiles are based on attendance, and 11.1% of our high school scores are based on attendance. Yes, these scores are not the end-all be-all, but when I hang out in kindergarten circles and pre-kindergarten circles. That's the nature of where I'm at in life. And the number of mothers that I've talked to that have specifically mentioned how they go to the performance profiles to help them decide where they would like to open enroll their children in, this is a pressing concern, especially when it comes to open enrollment. So, I understand that it's a tool, but I can't vote for a tool that I know is ineffective at learning.
I would just clarify, we're not asking to do 5 virtual learning days. We're asking that if we were to hit some kind of a emergency scenario, disaster scenario, weather scenario, that would be option available to the district for up to 5 days. Last year when we talked about it, I'd let you know that would be one of our last resorts that we would potentially consider. So no one's asking you to do virtual learning. I just want to make that very clear. We're not suggesting putting 5 virtual learning days in our calendar or trying to support a position that virtual learning is effective. I also don't think we would concede the point that mass amount of students don't have effective Chromebooks or access to Wi-Fi. Our data doesn't support that. Of course, there's isolated circumstances where that's the case. But please don't take this as a recommendation from the district that we're supportive of mass virtual learning. This is a last resort scenario or tool that we would want to have available to ourselves if needed.
And so, Matt, what's our option if inclement weather prohibits opening the buildings? If we don't do virtual learning during those days, we have to extend the school year, or?
Yeah, we would have to add time back into our calendar. We had a day early in the year where we had 4 schools that we had to cancel due to a water main break. If we would get to the point where we've added as much as we thought or felt comfortable further into June, or playing with Thursdays to add time back to the calendar, and say we hit a situation where we have everybody else caught up for the sufficient number of hours but those 4 schools. There's a caveat in the code that says we could just have those 4 schools do something. That might be an option where we'd employ this. We might employ this option rather than asking students to come back, for, heaven forbid, a 3rd week of June, right? Or something to that effect. So I think it's a tool. It's not the first tool we would go to. We use a lot of other tools looking at either adding days on, adding time on to the school day. And so this was just a code change that allowed districts to use it if warranted. But it would not be the first thing I would recommend to you guys for us to look at trying to change our calendar to reach the sufficient number of hours.
So
Thank you. Oh,
it seems to me like it's kind of a balance between deciding what's the best learning environment to provide for students if we have to cancel classes or school because of weather. So I'm not sure how that breaks out, frankly.
I totally get your concerns, but there's not a lot of learning that goes on in the 2nd week of June either. So, and I trust the superintendent to use his judgment on this.
all right. Any other comments? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve the virtual learning days.
Second.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Malone, Eastham, Williams, Finch, Abraham, and Istone voting yea, and Director Lingo voting nay.
Thank you, and that concludes our annual organizational meeting. Is there a motion for adjournment? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.